Good morning. I actually woke up nervous this morning because I'm speaking to my home crowd, and no pressure at all, especially when one of my friends from the men's breakfast said to me as I walked in, "Now don't screw up." That's what good friends are for, eh? Anyway, it really is a pleasure to be here. I was here almost exactly 2 years ago to the day to speak to you. And I was going to apologize for the fact that I actually used these two scriptures to speak to. But then I realized, as I had looked at the bulletin from 2 years ago, I just realized the choir sang exactly that same anthem 2 years ago when I was here. So now I'm not nervous at all. I think we're going to go with the flow. Anyway, when Molly and Carolyn asked me to come here and speak as part of your series about stewardship, they asked me to speak about the theme of stewardship as partnership. So I wondered what scriptures I could use as the inspiration, and as I said to you, I really came back to the same two I've used before because they still feed my spirit when I talk about stewardship. So this morning, as I approach retirement from my role as Financial Development Officer for the United Church of Canada, I thought it would be a good time to tell you what I've learned about stewardship. I can summarize my thoughts in 3 main points. First, stewardship is not about money. I think I just heard a collective gasp from the Finance Committee. Somebody's probably running for the smelling salts as I speak. Anyway, second, stewardship is easy. And third, stewardship is hard. Before I get to all that, I thought we could reflect on the scriptures for a moment. The stories of both Ruth and the Good Samaritan reveal a common message about the power of relationships. In the Old Testament story of Ruth, we've heard about how she would not leave her mother-in-law, Naomi, in spite of how bleak the future looked. Ruth could have gone on and made a whole new life for herself, as her sister-in-law, Orpah, set out to do. But instead, Ruth decided that the relationship with Naomi trumped all else, and that they were in this together, so to speak. Ruth was willing to take the risk of staying with Naomi, even there was no guarantee of what the reward would be, other than the satisfaction of remaining in Naomi's life. Turning to the story of the Good Samaritan, we hear about the power of relationships with those whom we've never met, even with those whom we may initially feel absolutely no affinity or any desire to form a relationship. To me, the story also demonstrates how taking risks and challenging convention can lead us down new paths into new relationships that we would never have otherwise imagined. These two stories also show us how relationships inspire our generosity. Ruth's generosity of spirit as she stayed to support Naomi, and the emotional and financial generosity of the Samaritan as he took care of the stranger whom he found by the side of the road. Now, I grew up with what might be called the traditional understanding of stewardship, that God, up there, owns everything that we've been given down here, and that we are to live as good stewards of these gifts by nurturing them, developing them, and giving them back to God in a spirit of thanksgiving. It's a very strong theology that has stood the test of time, and we sing this in number 543 at Voices United. We give thee but thine own, whate'er the gift may be. All that we have is thine alone, a trust, O God, from thee. May we thy bounties thus as stewards true receive, and gladly as thou blessest us, to thee our first fruits give. Over the last few years, however, I've explored other themes of stewardship, and in particular, I've been inspired by our ministry team right here in Orleans United Church. I also attended a 10-week course on stewardship presented by Reverend Glenn Stout, our recently retired minister at the Ottawa Lay School of Theology. And as a result, my ideas about stewardship have radically changed and have energized my work. You see, I heard from Reverend Glenn that he sees stewardship as partnership. That stewardship, in his words, is partnering with God and with each other to care for God's creation and all those who inhabit it. This moves us away from the hierarchical relationship between us and God and makes us partners in ministry, not only with God, but with our families, our community, and our world. I believe that thinking of stewardship in this way, by thinking this way, we acknowledge the need to establish and to develop healthy relationships as the most important part of living out our mission as followers of Jesus. A few moments ago in the sacrament of baptism, we undertook the responsibility for and the gift of a new partnership with these two young children and their families, and we recited the new creed. The new creed is our commitment to this kind of stewardship. It's set up in the very first sentence. We are not alone. We live in God's world. We go on to say that we are called to be the church, and in each of the lines that follows, we recite the ways in which we are called to live in healthy relationship, by celebrating God's presence in all around us, by loving and serving others, by living with respect in creation, by seeking justice and resisting evil. I believe that each of these lines is part of our call to stewardship. Each outlines the way in which we are to live in partnership with God, in relationship with the earth, and in relationship with one another, whether we are longtime friends or complete strangers. Now, I'm not an expert in church history by any means, but it seems to me that the theme of partnership is in our Christian DNA. First, consider Jesus' ministry. Jesus spoke constantly about relationships. He saw the need to move society to see relationships differently. Today's story of the Good Samaritan is only one example. His messages of unconditional love, peace, and social justice were radical at the time and very disturbing to both the religious and the political authorities. The Reformation, which began when Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the church door in Wittenberg in 1517, also radically challenged relationships in the church, starting with Luther's protest of the church hierarchy. He was driven by a conviction that the grace of God is freely given to all and can't be earned through our work or actions. And this is at the foundation of the baptism of these two youngsters today. It was a leveling of the playing field and a redefining of the individual's personal relationship with God. Moving to the 1700s, Methodism, a movement in the Church of England started by John Wesley, insisted that the church needed to be out there, building relationships, changing the lives of those who needed it the most, and not for only those who supported and sat comfortably inside the church buildings. It was a reaffirmation of the church's role in society, in the stewardship of the message of Jesus' unconditional love to those outside the church walls. And in 1925, these Methodist roots were instrumental in the creation of our own United Church of Canada, when the Methodist Church, Congregationalist Church, and 2/3 of Presbyterian congregations across the country joined in partnership to create a whole and uniquely Canadian church. It recognized that Jesus' message of unconditional love could be best delivered in partnership by coming together and creating a stronger voice for social justice in Canada. And over the past 92 years, the United Church has recognized that in most cases, its mission is most effectively carried out through partnership. For example, your financial support of the church's mission and service helps us support 92 ecumenical partners in 24 countries around the world, as well as many local and regional charities in Canada, whose feet are here on the ground, positioned to see the most immediate and the most pressing needs of their communities. So, the stewardship of Jesus' message through partnership is in our United Church DNA as well. Now, all of this leads me back to telling you about the three things I've learned about stewardship. First, I realize that it probably seems odd to hear someone with the job title of Financial Development Officer to say that stewardship is not about money. But in my 13 years in this role, I've come to believe that stewardship is about much more than money. It is, rather, about the generosity that we show in the relationships that we develop in our lives. True, Money is one important resource that we can use to make change happen. Indeed, it's often the only way for us to partner with and care for others who are either quite distant or perhaps close by through organizations who can act on our behalf in their own closer relationship with those in need. And Orleans United wouldn't be here for the community at all without your personal generosity and financial partnership. But stewardship for me is about more than what I'm able to give financially. It's about everything that the Creed encourages me to be aware of after I say, I am not alone, I live in God's world. I've learned that stewardship is about everything I do with all of my being. Yes, with all its physical, rational, emotional, and spiritual quirks that helps to make Jesus' message of unconditional love real in the lives of others. When I live with this sense of partnership with God, with the world around me, with our community here at Orleans United Church, with my family, and within myself, my focus changes to how I can be a partner in helping to change lives. I said that my second realization is that stewardship is easy. Being a steward of Jesus' mission can be as simple as saying hello to the two families here today, starting to show them that our commitment to care and be for them, here for them, is real. Or perhaps going into the coffee hour after the service and introducing yourself to someone you don't know. Or for some of you, it might be simply going into the coffee hour for the first time. Or perhaps phoning an old friend to say hello, or sending someone you know, perhaps here in the congregation, a thank you note for something that they've done that you appreciate. Simple things, actions that let others know that you see them and that you care. And finally, I said that stewardship is hard. And why? Well, first of all, it requires that we take risks. And we tend to avoid taking risks. Both of today's scriptures demonstrate this. The partnership between Ruth and Naomi, and between the Samaritan and the injured man by the side of the road, each shows what comes when risks are taken and the rewards are unknown. The second thing is that our culture makes stewardship difficult. We are constantly bombarded by messages that make us think that it's all about me. We get messages that say, you deserve this, you need this. You won't be truly happy unless you have this or unless you do this. So stewardship requires that we draw ourselves back from our culture to be countercultural as Jesus was. It reminds us to take a good look at how we respond to our call to be the church. It calls us to repartner with the things that truly matter to us as deliverers of Jesus' message. And finally, I think stewardship is difficult because it's not a one-time decision. I remember seeing a floor cleaning product called Once and Done. I remember thinking how neat it would be to wash the floor once and never have to do it again. Well, I wish that living as a faithful steward of the Christian message would be that easy. But it's not a once and done proposition. Living as faithful stewards is challenging because we constantly are being asked to redefine our relationships, often by new requests to join a cause, by new mail coming in the doors asking you to give, or to share our lives with others. Once we say, we are not alone, we live in God's world, it's just the beginning of a life of relationships and decisions. Essentially, faithful stewardship is lived out in the partnerships and our relationships with others. It is lived out in all the things that we do in our response to the call to be the church. Stewardship is lived out in the decisions that we make each and every day that help to change the lives of others. It is lived out in the partnerships that we intentionally create. Each and every one of us will find this easy. Each and every one of us will find it a challenge. So, how will you reach out this week as stewards of Jesus' gospel, showing that you care, making his message of love real in the lives of others? How will you risk being Ruth to the Naomis in your life? How will you be the good Samaritan to the strangers whom you find on the side of your pathway this week? As you head out of the sanctuary today, it's my hope that you will see stewardship in a new light and that you will continue to live in loving partnership with God.